All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're looking at what happens when small local producers in a country like India suddenly find themselves competing on a global stage. For them, globalization isn't some abstract concept. It's a real, day-to-day battle for survival.
This phrase right here, it just perfectly sums up the new reality. It's the tough choice facing so many small businesses. Either figure out how to compete with the whole world, or you might just go out of business. So let's see what that actually looks like for people on the ground. So let's take the Indian toy industry as a perfect example. On one hand, you've got local toy makers. Their costs are higher, and they're often making more traditional designs. And on the other hand, a flood of Chinese imports that are way cheaper and, let's be honest, have newer designs that really catch the eye. The result was a complete market takeover, and it happened fast. 70 to 80%. Just let that sink in for a moment. In just 1 year, that's how much of the Indian toy market was lost to Chinese products. We're not talking about a slow decline here. This was like a tidal wave that just wiped out local businesses, leaving them with huge losses.
And it wasn't just about toys, not at all. It was a domino effect that rippled across so many other important industries. We saw industrial units shutting down for things like batteries, plastics, even dairy products. This led to massive job losses, hitting a sector that's actually the second biggest employer in India, right after agriculture. The toy story was really just the tip of the iceberg.
So we've seen the impact, the what. But why? Why did all of this happen so quickly and with so much force? Now let's look at the powerful engines that are actually driving this whole new global reality.
Okay, at the very heart of this is the concept of globalization. Now, for anyone studying this is a perfect exam-ready definition you'll want to know. It's the rapid integration or interconnection between countries, and it's mainly driven by foreign trade, investment, and these huge companies called multinational corporations, or MNCs, which are basically just big companies that operate in lots of different countries.
So, how did this whole rapid interconnection thing happen so incredibly fast? Well, it really boils down to two main drivers that came together and completely changed the game. First, we have massive improvements in technology, and second, a huge shift in trade policies that we call liberalization.
Let's start with technology. It's really no exaggeration to say that technology has literally shrunk our world. Those massive oceans and distances that used to make global trade super slow and expensive, they've become much, much smaller obstacles, both in the real world and online.
Let's break down how. In transportation, something as simple as the shipping container was a game changer. It caused huge drops in port costs, making it way cheaper to move goods. At the same time, air transport got cheaper too. But the revolution in communication was maybe even bigger. With the internet, email, and cell phones, you can now run a global operation in real time for practically nothing.
So, technology basically built this superhighway for globalization. But it was government policy that really opened up the on-ramps. Let's zoom in on a key moment in 1991 when India decided to totally change the rules of the game for its economy.
You can really see a clear before and after here. For decades after independence, India used things called trade barriers, like taxes on imports, to shield its own young industries from foreign competition. But around 1991, the thinking changed. The government decided it was time to remove most of those protections and let Indian companies learn to compete on the world stage.
And that big policy change has a name: liberalization. Here's another key definition for you. It's pretty simple. It's the removal of those trade barriers, which lets goods be imported and exported more easily and allows foreign companies to come in and set up factories. So why make such a huge shift? Well, the idea from the government was that competition would be a good thing. It would force local companies to step up their game and improve the quality of their goods. It's also really important to note that this move was strongly supported by powerful international organizations that were pushing for more free trade around the world. All right, so the whole idea is free and open competition, which on the surface sounds pretty fair, right? But is the game of global trade actually played on a level field for everyone? Let's dig in and ask if free trade always means fair trade. I want you to really think about this for a second. If every country just tears down its protective walls, does that automatically create fair competition? Is it really a fair fight between a small farmer in India and a gigantic agricultural corporation in the US? Well, the evidence suggests there might be a pretty big double standard at play. You see, organizations like the World Trade Organization, or WTO,
have been very successful at pushing developing countries to remove their trade barriers. But at the exact same time, many developed countries have been able to unfairly hold on to their own.
And there is no better example of this than the whole debate around agricultural subsidies. This is where that idea of an unlevel playing field becomes crystal clear.
This chart really shows the huge difference. In a country like the USA, farmers are less than 0.5% of the population, yet they receive massive amounts of money from the government. Meanwhile, in developing nations, where farming employs a huge chunk of the population, they've been pressured to get rid of that exact same kind of support for their farmers.
So what happens because of all that government money? Well, U.S. farmers can then sell their crops on the world market for artificially low prices. A farmer in a developing country who gets no help from their government, they just can't compete with that. It directly hurts their ability to make a living, and it's a big reason why many developing countries are asking if the system is really fair.
So, as we start to wrap this up, it's pretty clear that globalization isn't just one thing. It really has two different faces. On one hand, it creates amazing connections, but on the other, it can create some really intense conflict.
So let's quickly recap the main points here. Technology connects us all, but that same connection can lead to fierce competition that crushes small producers. Open markets are supposed to improve quality, but the rules of the game can be seriously unfair. And while those big multinational corporations drive a lot of this integration, they also create huge power imbalances.
And that really leaves us with this big final question. We live in a world that is more connected than ever before. But knowing everything we've just talked about, the unleveled playing fields, the power imbalances, what would truly fair competition actually look like? It's definitely something worth thinking about.